So it's
Everybody.
basketball season. Basketball season is what's happening now.
Only for one more night, right?
Oh, really?
No.
I'm
Yeah.
clearly, finger on the pulse of sports news today. So I have no idea. No idea what's happening.
I always joke that unless it was on Friday Night Lights, it was not like I don't care about sports.
I
I
haven't
just
seen
went.
Friday
Oh, go
Night
ahead. Sorry, go
Lights.
ahead, Alyssa.
Sorry. It's just another thing I haven't seen is Friday Night Lights. So I've
It's
heard it's
not
great.
too late. It's not.
I know. I know.
I just went to Laredo. Did a really wonderful event there on Thursday, and it actually made me think. I watched Friday Night Lights sort of when it aired, but it did make me think about that show, and I wonder if I should rewatch it. 'Cause it now has been like uh, 15 years or something.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, it was so
it
good.
was a while ago.
Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. We will get started in just a minute.
My husband and I are watching Buffy, which I watched, but he's never seen. This is his first time watching it, and he's like obsessed. He is like obsessed with Buffy right now, and he's like, "When are we watching another episode?" I'm like, "Okay, calm down, calm down. It's gonna be okay." And his
Um,
commentary is really
I
funny.
actually never have seen that. Like, I feel like I know it has such a sort of cult following, but
It's
um,
fun. It's
does it
very,
feel super dated or not?
it does, but like in a nice way. Like
Yeah.
it's nostalgic and cozy, and is very much of its time, like, but I think that's kind of there's something fun about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
Maybe
I
it's time. Not for I mean for me to watch Buffy, not for us to start our bed.
I'll watch
it,
Friday
it
Night
could be
Lights and you
both.
watch Buffy.
It could be both because I hate to interrupt a discussion about television. I love television, which is one of the reasons that I was so excited for this event and for this
Perfect
book.
segue.
Yes, perfect segue. So, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Emily Summer, and I'm the book buyer here at East City Bookshop, a woman owned, community focused, independent bookstore located on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. We are so excited to be here with you all tonight. And before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, as I see some of you are already doing, please use the Zoom chat feature. We really love to see where you're located, where you're listening from, and your general enthusiasm for the book and our wonderful authors. We really enjoy and value the accessibility that these virtual events provide, but we do miss seeing and hearing your reactions. The chat helps us approximate that energy and connection that we experience in person, so we wholeheartedly encourage it. And if you have any technical difficulties, please put that in the chat as well. My colleague Emma is monitoring for any troubles that you may have and can help if necessary. For author questions, and we will have time for questions at the end, please put those in the Q&A box instead of the chat. That is where we will see them most easily. And most importantly, if you still need a paperback copy of Romantic Comedy or anything else by Curtis or Elissa, or any of the other books that will inevitably be mentioned tonight, you can order those on our website at eastcitybookshop.com. And we do ship anywhere in the country, so we can get those to you. And now for the reason that we're here. Some of you I know are East City Bookshop customers, so you know me and you know my tastes a little bit. And you might know that I am not a reader who needs a happy ending. In fact, I don't even really need a plot. I often want just pure interiority and speculation and thinking. I often want to be devastated. I really like to weep. So while I very much enjoy romantic comedies, I am not someone who always gravitates toward the genre. But every romance reader, even a casual fan like me, has a few favorite tropes. So I've learned that I really like second chance romance. I liked missed connections, but most fervently, what I really like is a celebrity, normal person relationship. So imagine my delight when I learned that Curtis Sittenfeld, one of my all-time favorite literary fiction writers, was writing just such a book. I was pumped. Then I actually started reading an advanced copy, and I was even more pumped. My high expectations were exceeded because what Curtis gives us in this book lives up to its lofty title. In my mind, it is, in fact, the platonic ideal of what a romantic comedy should be. A hot celebrity, a very realistic regular person, Curtis's uncanny observations and astute renderings of human connection and vulnerability, vivid interiority, like I always want, and robust, believable character development. All of that and key references to the Indigo Girls. Yes, that is right. Romantic comedy triumphed the genius of Amy and Emily even before Barbie did. So Curtis is just that good. Suffice it to say, this is one of my favorite books, and we as book buyers and booksellers do not really have favorite books. I wasn't surprised though, as I've read Curtis's other books, and with each one, I come away more astonished by her range and keen human understanding. So if you just discovered Curtis through this one, I urge you to read what we call her backlist. You'll be amazed, and it is a singular thrill for her to be with us this evening. In conversation with Curtis is Elissa Sussman, the best-selling author of Once More with Feeling, Funny You Should Ask, another romance right there in my preferred celebrity normal person wheelhouse, and 3 young adult novels. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their pets, and we are so grateful that she is here with us tonight too. Curtis and Elissa, thank you again for doing this and being here, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be here. I'm Elissa, and the lovely lady in pink is Curtis, whose book we shall be talking about tonight. And I'm just so excited because I read your book, Curtis, and I loved it. And I have so many questions to ask you, but I'm just so excited to celebrate romantic comedy, which is now out in paperback. And everyone go get a copy if you don't have it already. Get it in hardcover, get it in paperback. You need both, of course. But for anyone who has not read your book yet, can you give us the elevator pitch to get us all up to date?
Yes, and first of all, Elissa, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm sure we'll get to this, but I know you I mean, I feel like there's like many points of overlap between us, but I know that some of them are romances and Saturday Night Live. So yeah, this is like a joy to talk to you. Thank you, East City Bookshop, and Emily. That was such an incredibly nice introduction, like such a generous, specific, personalized introduction. So I think the elevator pitch is that a woman in her late 30s named Sally is a writer for a show that's very similar to Saturday Night Live. It's called The Night Owls, but it's sort of Saturday Night Live with just another name. And she's professionally successful. She had what she thinks of as a starter marriage in her early 20s, more than 15 years ago. And she now she's not really aspiring to get married because she doesn't sort of feel like the version of marriage that's available to her or the version of romance is that appealing. But and she also she writes a sketch about for the Night Owl. She writes a sketch about the phenomenon of talented but ordinary men from the show, like writers. I think we're so far out of the elevator.
But I'm staying in the elevator because I want to know.
I'll wrap it. It's like it's like a very tall building.
It's a New York building. It's fine.
But anyway, she writes a sketch making fun of like how, and this too is borrowed from Saturday Night Live. Men from the show who are writers or cast members who are talented but are like sort of ordinary seeming or ordinary looking will somehow end up dating and in some cases marrying women who are guests on the show as either like the musical guest or the guest host, who are like smoking hot household names, just like incredibly successful, incredibly talented, and it feels like there's this sort of imbalance. And Sally's sketch kind of points out the fact that this wouldn't happen probably with an ordinary female writer and like a gorgeous male celebrity. And then that week at the show, the guest host, who's doing double duty as the musical guest and guest host, is a pop singer named Noah Brewster. And there might be chemistry between Sally and Noah, but she's so self-doubting and sabotaging that it's unclear if the sparks will be allowed to fly. Okay, that's the end.
Well, I mean, I love that and like all the things you're talking about. And I think it's, we're going to get into the trope of famous person and regular person in a second. But I'd love to know if you remember what the sort of initial spark for the book was. Like what
Oh,
kind
I
of,
definitely do.
oh,
So my family was watching a lot of Saturday Night Live during the pandemic, and I would think to myself, someone should write a screenplay for a romantic comedy with exactly the premise I just described. Like a female writer at a show like this notices this pattern, thinks it would never happen if the genders were switched. And then and because it was it was the pandemic, and this is now going back to like the summer of 2021. I had aspired to like write my own pandemic novel, and I'd had a sort of false start. Like I just wanted to write something fun. And there was something that I thought might be fun, and it was interesting, but it was maybe not so fun and kind of dark and depressing. And then I thought, oh, maybe that idea that should be a screenplay actually should be a novel, and the someone who should write it should be me. And it was like again in August 2021, and truly I thought to myself almost like like, am I allowed to write a novel that would be so fun and enjoyable, and not like anyone else would say, no, you're not allowed to, but I think I thought like, is that a premise? Like, could that sustain a few hundred pages? Is it too slight or too fizzy or whatever? And then, I went with it. It was such a pleasurable experience to write it. Like, I think there's no book, and so this was my seventh novel, my eighth book, because one is a story collection. But I think there's no book that's ever like welcomed me in the same, which that might be actually a weird way of saying like I was happy to like enter it. Like it didn't ever feel like I had been pushed outside my own book, which some of my other books have pushed me out.
that's such a beautiful way to put it. And I totally know what you're talking about being like welcomed into a story where you're sort of like, oh, okay, you guys need me around to sort of push you around a bit.
Yeah, or
And
like I
but
enjoy your company. Like
yes,
which part of it I think was that it was like fun and funny and romantic, and and again, like going back to sort of writing my own pandemic escape, that I think I kind of felt like, well, if I want to write something fun, and this is the intersection of like a sketch comedy show and two people flirting and falling in love. Like if this isn't fun, then there's like no hope for me.
and the problem is a little deeper. We got a little bit of a problem. Well, it's so great that you bring up COVID. Not great that you brought up COVID. That was a bad way to put that. But I did want to know, like, what was it like choosing to write about COVID while in the pandemic still?
Um, so it's interesting. I mean, I think that like I do feel like for years to come, we'll all be sort of, sorting out COVID in so many different ways. And I think there was probably when I started the book, which again is like the summer of 2021, I think it was still in a moment when, and obviously like COVID still exists. It's not like it's finished or whatever, but it kind of felt like to me almost mandatory that I included, if I was setting the fiction in that time. And it's so the book starts in 2018 and then it jumps to 2020, and so it just felt like, of course, where I feel like if I started writing a story today and it was set in 2024, like let's say I was writing a 30-page short story, there might be one sentence where like a character is like, and then during the pandemic I did this or something, where it might be just like a factual reference, but it doesn't have to be part of the plot. So I think that, again, not that COVID is resolved now, but it felt much more unresolved when I was writing. And so I think I had a different sort of, like, because I even remember like early in the pandemic, people would be like, oh, are you going to include this in fiction? And almost, I mean, this seems so like so long ago and so ridiculous, but when we thought like we might have to stay home for 2 weeks or something, like, won't that be wacky? And then, just, I don't know. It is an interesting thing, like how fiction writers kind of metabolize this stuff that's in our culture. Like obviously we're not doctors or and there's other social phenomenon or whatever that we also, like it is a very strange thing how we sort of process it, like I think probably individually for ourselves and then also almost like as surrogates for our readers.
Yeah, and it really informs the plot in a lot of ways. It affects it. So was that sort of something you were aware of when you started the story, like how COVID was going to affect it? Because it's very specific and it, works so well with the context of your characters. I'm just
First, we
wondering.
have to say for anyone who hasn't read the book, it's a delightful, uplifting love story
Yes, yes, it
with a
is. It
little
is.
dash of COVID, just a pinch
I
of
mean, and
COVID.
it's like I do want to say, like, it is amazing that you are able to include it in a way that doesn't feel heavy and depressing, and it sort of feels like the way, like, these characters are coping with it and they're trying to figure it out, and there's that fear and that worry but still hope and still laugh and like lightness and laughter and things like
Yeah, no,
that.
no, I mean, I'm half kidding. I do think that it is central to the plot in the sense that, the first 50% of the book is a week in the life of this sketch comedy show. And then like Sally and Noah are sort of like flirting, but Sally doesn't know if they're flirting or she's like second guessing everything. And then they have this, I don't think this is a spoiler. They have this conversation where things kind of come to a head and it seems like things might sort of become like definitively romantic, but instead they go off the rails. And then 2 years pass and Noah reaches out to Sally by email, and then they start this email correspondence, which I feel like a lot of people are like, I don't know if I'd want to read a book about COVID or with a long email correspondence. I'm like, well, I have a novel for you. But I think that like in some ways it is a I mean, and I think you kind of have done this with your own books where like it's almost like they're supposed to be more entertaining or fun than real life, but they are supposed to have some relationship to reality too. And that it is realistic that in the industries that the two of them work in, like Noah has been performing for like 15 to 20 years in stadiums, and Sally works at this super hectic, live show that the pandemic forces them to kind of spend more time with themselves and their inner thoughts and like to maybe reflect on some of their regrets, which include the way that they parted from each other. So it is sort of central to the plot that they have the time and the incentive to be in touch with each other. And which almost, I mean, even though it's like, the pandemic was unequivocally bad, it allows there to be something like sort of hopeful or sweet to emerge from it, which also, I mean, I'm sure probably all of us know people who have had pandemic romances or reconnections or reevaluations of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the structure of the book because, like you said, it's in three parts. So it's the first part is Sally's POV, and then we get all of these emails, and then we go back to her POV. How did you decide? I mean, it's so beautifully structured. It flows so wonderfully and gives us a chance to really get to know
That's
Noah.
such a writer to writer compliment. And I can tell that you, based on your books, I can tell that you think a lot about structure, clearly, right?
I
We
do, I
we
do.
we no, I think we both like actually like a rigid structure, which I mean as an enormous compliment to both of us. Like I think that I feel like a lot of times a rigid structure, which probably rigid is like too unflattering a word, but makes the reader feel like the writer is in control in a reassuring way, like probably a subconscious way, but a reassuring way. Like the writer knows what she is doing and she is
Yeah.
like making like deliberate choices. Okay, wait, sorry. Well, I got so enthralled in our mutual compliments that I lost the question.
Well, I wanted to know how you decided on like structuring it this way, and if you ever had a way where, or a version of it where it wasn't structured this way, or like the process of that.
I think I actually did conceive of this. Like I'm very open to making changes as I go along. So I do make outlines. I tend to actually revise my outlines because a lot of times I'll think I can achieve what I'm trying to achieve in 5 scenes. And then as I get into it, I'm like, oh, I can achieve what I'm trying to achieve in like 17 scenes. So I have to kind of break down what goes where. But I did always imagine the email section in the middle. And one of the reasons it was appealing to me is that if the reader reads only the emails themselves without what Noah or Sally is thinking outside of it, then the reader has exactly the same information that they have. So the reader can be like, is that a flirtatious, like sentence that's being thrown out there? Is that like a little feeler? And then should Sally respond to that equally flirtatiously, or if she does, will it be really embarrassing and she misunderstood him? Um and actually, again, I think that some readers are skeptical about whether they want to read like a 12 paragraph email, and a lot of people say to me that it's like their favorite section, or they get totally sucked in, and that's when which I'm kind of like, who wouldn't want to read someone else's flirty emails? Like I would.
Well, they're not all as well written as yours, so
Even so, I would take a badly written flirty email.
LOL XOXO. Well, that's great, and it gives us such a chance to learn about Noah and him speaking in his own voice, because we are really seeing a lot of the story from Sally's perspective. And you sort of touched on this. I think the dynamic between them is so interesting. And having also written a normal person celebrity romance, the power dynamic between especially a famous man and a less famous woman
Mhm.
makes it so that what you would imagine like seems very obvious flirting is not.
Mm.
So, and I love that you were sort of, including that, and that's such an important part of the story. And I just wanted to talk about like what is there anything else or what drew you to wanting to write that dynamic, the famous person and normal person.
I mean, I do think it was like this very specific idea that I had while watching SNL, that was so rooted in gender and fame and everything. I mean, at the same time, I definitely grew up reading romances. I was a teenager in this sort of golden age of Nora Ephron, and also this sort of like Notting Hill and Say Anything. And so I definitely feel as if romances are sort of in my bloodstream. I mean, they might be in the bloodstream of almost most people who've seen movies or read books or whatever. Like it's such a frequent, irresistible structure. Like there's something so inherently story-like about two people falling in love. Um, so I don't think that I thought like this is my favorite trope and kind of like how can I explore it? I think I was like, this is a story I want to write. And it turns out that it, kind of it like includes this trope. I don't how would you answer that? Like were you more like I want to write like a celebrity normie romance and then figured out who's who, or did you have more of a specific idea for the plot of? And I guess, well, like for funny, you should ask which one was it?
Yeah. I think for me it was that I think I had read a lot of, because I'm also a huge romance reader,
Mm.
like just give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. And I read a lot of romances with that dynamic, but there was always a sense that the normal person didn't know who the celebrity was. And I was just like, that
Oh,
would never happen to me. I, I read people, all these, and I was like,
same.
what would it be like if not only does she know him, but she has a crush on him? How does that make it like extra awkward and weird? But she's also like doing a job. So, it's just like Sally. It's like this is within the constructs of their work.
Hmm.
So the lines are even more blurred because you're just like, okay, is this person being nice to me because this is going to help them with their job? Are they being nice to me because they just are a nice, flirtatious person? Especially with like actors and performers, you're like, you know, that's what they're good at. That's what
Yeah,
that's
they're
what
charismatic. There's a
they're
reason
charismatic.
they're famous. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then, but I think there's also this sense of like, I think, everyone has insecurities, and having known quite a few actors, I know that their intelligence is something that they feel insecure about. So it's interesting having both of our heroines are writers.
Hmm.
And I think that is it's a it's a skill that I think if you're a writer, you're like, all my friends are writers, we all do this. But people who, who it's magic, it feels like magic. And I think you capture that with Noah and Sally, like his sort of awe at her and her abilities, and where she's just not seeing it anymore, which I think really plays into that lovely building romance, and you can see exactly why he likes her and why she's not sure how he feels.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting analogy, because I don't even think I've thought of it in those terms, but I think that everything you're saying is, and even there, I think there's a moment in Romantic Comedy where she's almost like watching him like kind of sing, and she's so impressed, and she's like, oh, that's magic. Like writing is so cerebral, but like singing is so magical. And yeah, there is a
Yeah.
kind of tendency to devalue the thing that you're able to do.
Yeah, and especially she's surrounded by other writers all day long,
Mhm.
and writers and performers and all of these things. So I imagine that, yeah, I imagine the SNL, the that kind of world, the Night Owls world can be very intense for
Well, okay,
women in
don't you
particular.
have some firsthand experience? Am I allowed to
Yes.
ask you?
No, you're not. In college, I was an intern at SNL. And so when I read your book, I was like, oh my God, like this, it was so spot on. It was like being thrust back into that experience in good ways and bad ways. And so I would really love for you to talk about like your research and like, were you backstage just like sneaking around taking notes? Because it really feels like that.
Oh my God. I wish that I was backstage sneaking around. And so I'll kind of like jump to the end of my research process first, which is ultimately I attended a dress rehearsal, which, as you would know, the dress rehearsal is immediately before the live show, and it's essentially identical to the live show, except it's a little longer, like a few sketches get cut for time, based on audience reaction. And the entire audience is like swapped out. So I think it's maybe, I mean, again, I don't know if you remember this. If the live one is at 10:30, I can't remember if the dress rehearsal was like 8 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah, something like
Um,
that.
so, and I definitely, my wonderful, lovely agent Claudia like helped get me a ticket, and I was in kind of like in full dorky research mode, where I think this is in like March 2022. And I was like by myself, and it was also like snowy, so I was like, wearing snow boots, and I was thinking to myself, like, can I take a notebook and write, or will they like not like that? And it turned out that I didn't. It was actually a huge relief, because there was very little that happened that was different from what I had pictured or imagined based on research. And I had done a ton of research. I mean, there was something about being in the live space that was different, or like one of the things that was different was I was surprised by how the cast members seemed to perform for the camera rather than for the audience. Because I think when you're at home, you almost feel the opposite. Like you feel like it's just people are screaming with laughter and there's hilarity and whatever. And it kind of felt much more like almost subdued at times. And then another thing that I hadn't understood exactly, like I understood that, which again, I'm sure this is familiar to you, that sometimes different cast members in the same sketch are on different stages. And so, for instance, if there's like a politician giving a press conference, the politician behind the podium might be on one stage, and then the people playing the journalists who are supposedly facing him are on the other stage. And I think I thought, like, oh, that occasionally happens. And it seemed like it happened like 50% of the sketches were people like in totally different, areas of the stage. But those were like really minor things. Like I wasn't, and the way that I did research, so I mean, have you read that oral history live from New York? It's like
I
this,
haven't.
oh my God, it's a delight. Like
Okay.
it starts in 1975, and then it's been updated several times. So it's not up to now, but it's maybe up to like 7 years ago or something. And there's just like so many hilarious or like over the top anecdotes on every page. It's also, I listen to tons of comedian podcasts, including like WTF with Mark Maron, who, longed to be a cast member, never was, but is sort of all the more obsessed with SNL because of that. Or the podcast Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey, hosted by Dana Carvey and David Spade, came into existence while I was writing the book. And it's literally just all SNL all the time. Like it's like them interviewing cast members, writers, like former hosts. And so I mean, there's a YouTube channel, there's a ton of information. And then also in the end, I did conduct a couple interviews with people who'd worked there in the sort of recent past, when I had like super nitty gritty questions that they were almost like so uninteresting to anyone else that they weren't included in books, but I wanted to know them.
Right. And like stuff like that always adds like this layer of like confidence. I think you were talking about earlier, like so the reader feels like they're in good hands, like someone who knows what they're talking about. Tell us again the name of the book that you were talking about.
Oh, Live from New York, which
Okay.
it's funny, for a long time I had it on the shelf above my desk, and finally it was time to move on. But it's like, again, it's an oral history. It's 750 pages. Never will you read 750 more delightful pages. And there's also so many cast members have written. Oh, I see someone talking about Leslie Jones. I haven't, that one came out. That came out, I think maybe even just last fall. There's a couple that that have come out, like Kenan Thompson, like also has one where, and I'm kind of like, oh, I like I become almost afraid of doing research, because although there was a really interesting profile of Leslie Jones, side note, in the New Yorker that I did read and make use of. But also Colin Jost's book, A Very Punchable Face, is delight. I mean, there's a chapter so disgusting that I had to skip it, but it's otherwise delightful.
Oh God.
I can't even, it's not like, I'm trying to think of what, it's kind of like disgusting in a healthish way, not in like a personality. I know I've probably
That's
made it.
almost worse, I think.
It's the kind of thing that, this is what it is. Well, there's actually, the funny thing is there's two chapters. There's one like toilety disgusting chapter. I loved it. And then there's one other like health disgusting. And I was like, I can't read it because it's going to give me like literal nightmares.
Yeah.
But anyway, oh yes, there's Cecily Strong. I mean, there's obviously Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Rachel Dratch. There's one that's a little bit like maybe less well known, is Jay Mohr, Mohr, wrote this book Gasping for Airtime, where I mean, in a pretty open, honest way, it feels like he's really trying to work through some serious issues he experienced kind of during and because of SNL. And it feels like it might not have done him any favors for his career to write such an honest book, but it was really useful for me doing research.
Like, thanks, Jay. Well, and you can get all those books at East City Bookshop, which is great. More books to read. I would love, I'm like looking at my questions right now. I'm interested in how you balanced, the book is called Romantic Comedy, and so it has to sort of have a balance of both. And I'm wondering, it's a tricky one. How did you strike that balance?
So, okay. So I actually feel like I kind of gave myself permission to like write a novel and not to try to be Tina Fey. Like I understand that I'm not Tina Fey, and like I'm not professionally funny. Like I am a professional writer and I'm not a professional comedian. And so I was kind of like, I have faith in my ability to get characters through a scene, and that scene can be at a sketch comedy show. And like, I mean, I think that life is really funny and like really sad in an often undignified way. So if you just portray real life, like inevitably it will be funny. I mean, again, there is a difference between something being like hilarious or primarily funny. And I think I like sort of liberated myself by recognizing that that's not the goal. And so even like, um, there's one scene where you're really kind of like hearing the one-liners, but that actually it's for a sketch that doesn't make it on air. So I was like, if you didn't think this funny, that's fine. Like although people do often tell me that they really like it's like dogs doing Google searches that they really like that scene. And this is totally true. My own kids who were like, in sort of elementary and middle school at the time generated the one-liners with me. Like one day we were like stuck in traffic in a parking lot, and I was like, oh, let's do that dog thing. And so I sometimes tell them like it's a family business, which as they get older they're a little bit more resistant to that. Anyway, I kind of felt like it has to be like humor adjacent, but it isn't, I don't know, like it you won't mistake it for watching a sitcom. It's about
Yeah.
matters of the heart.
You're like, it's the romance. It's the
Yeah,
romance. And then it's the comedy. It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
romance first and then the comedy.
exactly.
Um, I don't know if you get this feedback, but I hear often when writing romance that us romance writers tend to write unrealistic male characters, which I always take as like they just have like human feelings and emotions. So, I'm like, what men do you guys know? But we talked about before, like we really get to know Noah through his emails. And did you take a different approach? Like how can you talk a little bit about switching from Sally's POV to writing from his voice, and then also just going back and forth between the two of them, making them sound distinct?
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely get the same feedback that you get where people will say, sort of like, and they might be like, I loved this book, like no man like Noah actually exists, but I love the book. And I will think like, I mean, most men probably aren't like no, but I think that there are. And I've even thought to myself, if there were a straight man who was like feeling like he wasn't dating as successfully as he wanted to, maybe he should read our books. And like I feel like, because the thing that I don't think that people think Noah is a dream man because he's a rich celebrity. I think they think he's a dream man because he like listens to Sally, he remembers what she says, and like he really likes her and is like really like complimentary and warm and sort of not fazed by her neuroses. And it's like that's actually more than his like chiseled abs or whatever.
And that's not unrealistic. Those are not unrealistic qualities
Right,
to
right,
search
right.
for.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Um, so in terms, I mean, I sometimes felt writing the emails that it reminded me a little bit of like I would sometimes when I was little, I would like occasionally play checkers where I was both sides. Like I was the black checkers and I was the red checkers. So it was like I'd like move and then I'd go to the other side of the board and then I'd like move again, move against myself. And I kind of felt like that with the emails where I was like, I'm Noah, I'm Sally, I'm Noah. And I actually did try to kind of keep a list on my desk of their verbal tics so that I didn't give my own verbal tics to both of them. So it would be like, like Noah uses ellipses, or Noah uses the word like kinda, kinda, or I think that Noah writes L period A period for Los Angeles, but Sally just writes like LA with no period. I mean, again, it's stuff that a person might not necessarily even notice, but I did feel like I did want them to have distinct voices. And in some ways, because as you said, like she's a writer and he writes his songs, but he's not like a writer. I think that when you are a professional writer, like something that I think that maybe surprises people outside of publishing, I don't think anyone uses um exclamation points more crazily and enthusiastically than people in publishing. And I think it's partly because we probably have some confidence in how punctuation works. So we're like fine being really like flippant and casual and breaking the rules. Whereas someone, I know, I see all these people who are like in publishing, are like, yeah, yeah. I mean, like in publishing, like if someone was like, oh my God, like you got such a nice shout out in Glamour magazine, congratulations, like 7 exclamation points, where I think anyone outside of publishing would be like, I don't want to seem like a person who uses more than 2 exclamation points in a row, like that's so it was like I think that Sally is actually a more she has a breezier tone in writing, although she is a more anxious person. And Noah has a slightly more self-conscious tone in writing, even though he's more comfortable and confident in the world than Sally is.
Yeah, and I mean, he's sort of flirting with her on her terms at that point, because
Yeah,
this is her medium more than
yeah,
it's his.
yeah,
So it's understandable where he's probably at home like rewriting it several times, and she's doing it a little faster, and being like, wait, what did I just send? Like, why
yeah,
did I
yeah.
say that?
By the way, hold on to that phrase, flirting with her on her terms. I think that could be in your next novel.
Great.
Flirt
Excellent.
with me on my terms.
Literally on
The
my terms.
title.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we have time for one more question for me, and then we're going to go to questions from the
From the
lovely
exclamation point use.
exclamation point. Okay, so this is a question I like to ask all authors, which is, what is your or if you have, do you have a North Star, which is like kind of an early creative awakening? It's like it's kind of the positive version of like who hurt you, like who, like what is the root of your or one of the roots of the thing that drives you to tell the type of stories that you do? Is there a feeling you're chasing or trying to recreate from like
Oh,
when you
that's such a
first
good question. I
realized
mean,
storytelling existed?
I feel like I could probably answer that. Like in some ways, at different ages, I had really different experiences where I mean, or like this different versions of the same experience of just kind of feeling like, I mean, the thing that reading gave me from a very young age was I kind of felt like like this is like the world, but like juicier, or like it's telling me things I don't know. And ideally, like it has the boring stuff cut out, and again, it has this like momentum and I remember feeling that like reading like the Boxcar Children when I was probably like 7 or something. And then I remember, I think when I was the summer before my senior year in high school, like someone said, a teacher said, buy the Best American Short Stories anthology. And I do feel like it kind of made my head explode, like to read, like Lori Moore or Charles D'Ambrosio, or and it just like, you know, because again, I mean, I was 18. There was so much I didn't know about the world, but to like read about kind of like people going through their lives and having sort of like weird experiences and intense emotions, and they were described so precisely, and they were sort of like recognizable to me, but also other. And so I felt very like gripped by that. And I like loved feeling gripped by that. And so yeah, I mean, I think that it's just like I mean, like so many writers, like I think that I like it's almost like I became a writer because I wanted to like climb inside books. And like this was like the
Yeah.
closest way that I could do it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, climbing inside books is like the perfect description of just like, where is the door? How do I get in? It's
Yeah,
like, I think
yeah.
it's,
How can I live inside this instead of
exactly.
just be like, yeah, like have my face pressed to the
Yeah.
window.
Um, I love that. Okay, I'm gonna look at some of the Q&A, the questions that people are asking. So someone asked, as an aspiring novelist, I would love to hear about your writing process, any rituals or habits you have, and what is your revision process like?
Okay. Let me
It's
go.
always like a hard,
I
some
know that's
writers,
I'm
it's
trying
like
to
a
think
hard
which
to
part
talk
of
about.
well, okay, so I have this is very easy because again I'm sitting at my desk. This is like the weirdest thing I do, and it's no, actually, this is not the weirdest thing I do. Can you see this? So
Oh
every
yeah.
day I write the date, then I write what time it is, then I write my word count that I'm starting from that day. And then I also sometimes write the page because I print out my pages daily, which I think that might be like, I'm 48. And so I think maybe younger people don't have the attachment to, most younger people don't have the attachment to print that I do. So it is this ritualistic thing where this is, I mean, like you can even see like on, I mean, I have like I'm like, there's a reason you can't see the rest of my office, like where I'm like, oh, I'll show you 17 other pages. But this one, I had 0 words on March 13th. And then on March 31st, I had 6,986 words. So it's like because writing can feel so slow, and it's almost like you have to prove to yourself, I have to prove to myself that I am making progress. So that I think that's one thing. I mean, I'm extraordinarily lucky to be a full-time writer. Like this is my job. I think that if you're not a full-time writer, which most people who write aren't, I think that planning ahead of time when you will write, like schedule, whether it's like 6 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday, like 6 to 7 a.m., or it's this chunk of time on Sunday, and just like protecting that time and kind of like almost making logistical or time management plans to allow yourself to write when you want to, and then trying to stay off the internet. That's the hardest part of all.
That is true. Do you have any recommendations of books in a similar vein to romantic comedy? So the writing style, the humor, literary fiction, or romance?
Well, no, this is also, it's like my huge bag of like there's like an animal is gonna pop out from here. I mean, certainly I'm sure that a lot of people on here have read both of our books, but I know I don't have, I mean, funny you should ask, is somewhere in my house. I don't know where in my house, but also that I think I have a huge soft spot for Robin Lee's The Idea of You, which it's either, is the movie out or out in like a
It's
week or something?
it's soon, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like super soon. So, it's out in May with Anne Hathaway as the star, and then some handsome young man whose name I can't remember, which just is also the star. So that's a really good one. I mean, I don't know, what do you say, like when people ask you, if somebody's like, I loved Funny You Should Ask, or like, what do you tell them to read?
I recommend like Ava Wilder, who is also a Random House author, one of our sister Random House authors, who writes sort of the famous person romance, like regular romance. Katie Cotugno is like a major must read for me. I read anything that she writes, and she wrote a really great. She's writing a like kind of Taylor Swifty, Travis Kelce
Oh, wait.
book. So that's coming
I
out this
feel like
year.
I kind of heard of that, and that's like public information besides you
Yeah,
announced.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm not announcing it here. I hope not. I'm pretty sure it's out. I'm pretty sure it's coming out this year. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So those are some books that I
Oh
would
yeah,
recommend.
okay. I can see in the chat. I can see like yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. So this is Princess I Love Eligible, which I love as well. If you had to choose another classic to reinvent, which would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I
I
mean,
love that question.
yeah. Well, I probably shouldn't tell you. Not you, Alyssa, but
I'm gonna
like,
steal it.
I know. I'm trying to think if I should like answer that now. I mean, there aren't that many, not because there aren't like, many classic books that I love, but just because I think that thing that we were talking about before of almost like wanting to climb inside a book, or like feeling like you could exist. I think you need that. It needs to be more than just admiration for a book. Like you need to feel this really intense connection with it. So I do I do have some ideas. I'm not sure I'll do it again, actually, but you never know. I
Mm.
turns out I've done many things I thought I wouldn't do it again in this life.
Um, okay, let's see some more questions. Um,
Wait, by the way, I remember,
yeah.
do we talk about what we're reading now?
Oh, we should. You should talk
I mean, well,
because I
I
prepped
think
you
you're
for that
asking.
question.
Well, I was, because like we talked about this a little bit before, and I was like, I want to
Yeah.
get this right. So I'll really spontaneously say, I'm listening. So a lot of times I listen to nonfiction on audio, and then I read fiction in print. Um, and I'm listening to this very interesting book it's called Strange Rights, like Rites, by a writer named Tara Isabella Burton. I'm like reading this from a post-it because I wanted to get her name right. And it's sort of about like kind of like religious rituals that have substituted traditional religion um, in our sort of secular age that people practice without thinking of them as religious. So it's very interesting. Someone actually gave it to me, which I don't know if people, I think sometimes people are reluctant to give books to a writer, other than like publishers give books to writers promotionally, but like a
Yeah.
friend will be reluctant to. And then I just met a writer named A.H. Kim, which okay, so this is her first novel that's called A Good Family. But then she had a book come out this week and she was delightful. I just met her in Minneapolis, called Relative Strangers, which you'll see the reason this made me think of this whole topic, but it's a retelling of Sense and Sensibility. So that too. So I feel like this is I think not like this is the one that I want to read next, but it's not any kind of retelling. But then she also has another. So if you like the like reimagined classic, yeah, and it's A.H. Kim.
I love Sense and Sensibility. It's I think one of my favorite Austens. Very much
Me too.
connect to the older sister. Um,
Interesting. Interesting.
yes, yes. Um, let's see. How do you like to organize the information you're uncovering while doing research? It's a great question.
I know that is a good question. I mean, so I feel like there are sometimes books that I sit with open on my lap while writing because it's like there's very specific information I'm trying to like remember, and even there is a part where Sally describes an email to Noah being interviewed at the Night Owl show. And I did really refer to like Colin Jost's book for that to like, because a lot of times it's like you can wait for Lauren Michaels, you can wait for like 3 hours, you can wait for 8 hours, you can wait for 3 days, and then you have like a 15-minute conversation with him or whatever.
Mhm.
And he's often like, maybe he's in the building, maybe he's in the Hamptons.
Who
Um,
knows?
I know, right. But then there's also, so there's some research where it's like there's very specific information, but then there's other research where it's almost like I'm trying to be conversant in the topic. And so, and that's where I'm like maybe taking a walk, listening to a podcast or listening to like Sarah Silverman's memoir. She was on SNL, I think just for like a year, or like Steve Martin's memoir. And I'm just almost trying to like think like, maybe this is a phrase that several comedians use that I didn't know was a phrase until I listened to these. Or like sometimes I would actually end up hearing the same anecdote from more than one person. So then it's kind of like this sort of central narrative of comedy. So it's a lot of it, it's almost like like going to another country and like walking around or something, but you're not really having an agenda. You're just trying to become much more familiar with the topic.
Was there anything that you discovered while you were doing research that really changed how you were thinking of the story, or was the research, most of it done sort of before you got into the nitty-gritty of it?
Um, I'm trying to think of how, I mean, so I had like read Bossy Pants, the minute it came out, which I think was maybe 2011. Um, and which does give some glimpses into SNL. And so I think there was some, and I had read Amy Poehler's book when it came out. So I think I don't know um if there were any huge revelations. Yeah, I don't know if I mean one thing that I think kind of came up a few times, which is this is speaking in big generalizations and maybe this isn't true, but or like it's like less true as time passes, but um like there is some idea that like sometimes maybe men in comedy are kind of maybe more rule breakers, and women in comedy are more like actually, I don't know, well behaved. This is definitely like an idea put forth by Tina Fey. Did you find that to be true? Like,
I mean, I think just my experience in life and the world, I think that our expectations for women and men are so different.
yeah.
And, and sort of going back to what we were talking about early about, Noah being this like dream man and all this stuff. I know with all my female characters, I always get the comment that she's unlikable, that she's
Mm.
difficult, she's not relatable.
Mm.
Um, and I never like, even if people are like, he's not realistic, they're still like, but I love him. And it's like with women, it's like, oh, she talked about this and I hate her,
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know if you got that feedback on Sally, because I think
I've
Sally's
never gotten that feedback for any of my female characters. Not,
no,
not since I was in grad school. Never. No, I've
and
never.
never in grad school, I'm sure in grad school it was all
I know. Well, I'll tell you. So I think the greatest. Sorry, again, there are people from Random House watching. So the greatest triumph of my career is that. So when there's like maybe book club questions in the back of the book, and I got one in my story collection that said something like, I could probably find it. Should I find it? Okay, sorry. Wait,
yes, no, I want to
wait,
know.
I just want to get this, since this was the highlight of my career. I want to get it right. Okay. Okay, wait. Um, Readers and reviewers often debate whether female characters in fiction are likable. Do you think creating likable characters is one of Sittenfeld's goals?
Well, Sittenfeld, is it your goal?
Um, Thank you, Sussman, for asking. No, it's not. I mean, so my favorite writer is Alice Munro, who I'm sure most people know is like the Canadian short story writing genius, and Nobel winner. And I like one of the reasons I love her stories is that sometimes it's like when I get to the female character who's kind of like self-interested and like disagreeable, like I'm like, I've gotten to the center of the story. Like I know, who gets to be like sort of pushing the plot forward and who will have these like inconvenient things she wants or inconvenient reactions to other people, and it's to me that's like what life is. But I do respect that there are all kinds of writers and all kinds of readers, and some readers I think want a protagonist who's more of a sort of role model or something, or like is more positive. And I mean, I feel like um I don't know, like of course when it comes to fiction, I'll think like my opinion is like everyone should share it. But when it comes to things like food or music or clothing, I'll feel like there's many different ways to be. And so I know that actually there are many different ways to be when it comes to fiction too.
What? No, there's one way. There is one way.
I've heard that there are many different ways to.
I think we are almost out of time, but I'm going to ask one more question, just because, why not? Um, so you loved SNL before you started writing this book. If you could transport yourself to an era of SNL, which cast members, like which season or something would you just like, I would love to be in the audience for that.
Oh, such a fun question. So a funny thing is, Lauren Michaels, as you might know, says people's favorite kind of era of SNL is the era, or they say it was the funniest or the best when they were in middle school or when they were in high school. And it doesn't matter when they were, but like that's what they like the best. I actually am an exception to that. And I think that the sort of absolute best SNL is kind of like the heyday, which is only maybe like 5 years ago, of like Kate McKinnon, Adie Bryant, like Ego Wodum, and even coming like Bowen Yang. And I think that the current cast is very, very talented still, but I do think there's like an Adie Bryant, Kate McKinnon, Cecily Strong magic where even, I mean, again, like there's so many, like I love Maya Rudolph, like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, but there was something a little bit when they kind of became prominent, there was something that was a little bit like those ladies are funny, or like this is, treading new ground. Whereas in the recent, by like the last, 8 years or 5 years or whatever, I mean, I do think the women were like the dominant cast members, or there could be a sketch that would have seemed notably feminist or female in the past, and like almost like how'd that slip in, that was just like unremarkable because they were such powerhouses. Like whether it was like a sketch set at a slumber party, or a sketch about like, women bringing men home for like the holidays to their parents' house, like in their single bed or whatever.
Yes, yes.
Like there's just all this, or like even, I mean, Mom Jeans was like Tina Fey's time, but
Mhm.
yeah, like there's this female sensibility that really like increased, but also felt really organic in a way that I love. But they're all so talented. I mean, I'm definitely, again, like I feel the thing that Sally feels, where it's like, I mean, with all due respect, like writers are kind of nerdy, but like cast, they're so funny and they're so talented. And yeah. Thank you, Elissa. This was so fun.
Yeah, this was a delight. I could talk forever, but unfortunately, we have to go.
Ah, the worst part about these events, the only bad part about events, is when I have to pop back in and be like, "Oh, we're cutting it short," because I am like everybody else who is listening in. We could keep going. We would love to let you keep going, but thank you so much for giving us this hour of your time and letting us listen in to all these wonderful insights. Elissa, those were great questions. Curtis, thank you so much for agreeing to be here. For everybody who is listening and paying attention to the recommendations, if you're local, please come into the store and nerd out with me. I would love to talk about SNL memoirs. Molly Shannon's is great.
Oh,
And
great, great.
talk about Curtis's backlist and Elissa's book. I know you've got another one that has been announced, Elissa. We're already taking pre-orders for it, even though I think it's next year, right?
Next
Like
year,
I
yeah.
think we already have pre-orders in the system
Aw.
for it. So that is impressive. So thank you both for being here. Thank you to everyone who is listening in. And please, if you're interested, if you're not local and you're interested in more virtual events like this, our default event structure, even when we host someone in the store, is to live stream it. So we offer hybrid events and virtual events. So check out the website and see what else you might want to tune in for. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Bye.